At 54, one has accumulated a certain volume of data from the experiment of living. Today, I will present not maxims, but 54 observations on the fallible human and social systems in which we operate. Some of these hypotheses were formed easily. Others were the product of costly errors that forced a complete reassessment of my entire framework. Each has been instrumental in shaping my perception of the world. These are not principles of business or productivity, though their applications may overlap. They are observations on the human condition, derived from the messy process of testing ideas against reality, a process that involves miscalculations, systemic failures, unexpected successes, the loss of key partners, and the formation of unforeseen alliances. Some of these points will confirm your existing models. Others may seem irrelevant until a future crisis reveals their salience. This is acceptable. Wisdom is not a destination one arrives at. It is the perpetual process of refining one's conceptual framework, decision by decision, outcome by outcome. Here are the initial observations. 1. Your parents were operating with imperfect information. The sooner you recognize that your initial worldview was constructed by fallible individuals, the sooner you can accept its flaws and assume full responsibility for building your own, more robust model. 2. Most advice originates from untested or irrelevant models. Acknowledge the input from others politely, but understand it as mere data. Your life is a unique set of conditions. Trust only the hypotheses you are willing and able to test yourself. 3. Being correct is not synonymous with being effective. One can win a debate on logical grounds, yet fail to achieve the desired outcome. You can prove your thesis and, in the process, alter the environment so as to make your victory meaningless. The only valid metric is the result. 4. Loneliness is a deficit of intellectual engagement, not a lack of proximity. The most profound isolation can be found in crowded rooms where no meaningful ideas are exchanged. Conversely, the deepest connections can be formed in the solitary analysis of a complex system. 5. Your first reaction to disruptive information is sentiment, not analysis. A market or a mind reacts emotionally to a shock. A strategic response requires allowing the initial volatility to subside before committing capital or credibility. 6. The human mind is a poor risk analyst. It fixates on forecasted, high-profile anxieties, most of which never materialize. The true systemic risks, the black swans, are almost always the ones that were never part of the initial forecast. 7. Time is a universal commodity. Strategic energy is a scarce capital. You can have an abundance of the former, but without the focused capacity for thought and decisive action, it has no value. 8. Arguments are forgotten. The perception you create is permanent. People's long-term model of you is built not on the logic of your words, but on the feeling of confidence, stability, or fear you instilled. This is the bedrock of influence. 9. The most difficult variable to correct is your own fallibility. Until you fully internalize the high probability of your own errors, you are condemned to repeat them, driven by the same unexamined assumptions. 10. Decades are phases of capital allocation. The 20s are for acquiring intellectual capital. The 30s are for building foundational systems. The 40s are for leveraging those systems for influence. The 50s are for deploying the wisdom gained from the failures of the previous stages. 11. Most systems are self-correcting. A disturbed equilibrium will often revert to the mean without intervention. Premature action is a common error. Strategic inaction is a powerful, underutilized tool. 12. You cannot be the primary agent in another person's life. You can provide resources, offer frameworks, and be a source of stability, but you cannot generate their internal motivation. Agency cannot be outsourced. 13. Reflexivity applies to everything, not just markets. Knowledge, reputation, and relationships are all systems where perception influences reality, creating feedback loops. Early investments in the right frameworks compound at a disproportionate rate over time. 14. Your primary partner is your most critical long-term alliance. This relationship is never neutral. It will either create a powerful positive feedback loop that amplifies all your efforts, or a negative one that systematically drains your resources. Choose accordingly. 15. Children do not require perfect models. They require a consistent framework. They are building their initial map of the world. The reliability of its core inputs is more important than the flawlessness of the cartographer. 16. Expertise is the cumulative result of initial incompetence. Every master of a system, whether a market or a craft, began with a flawed model and a series of failed executions. The individuals you admire did not start with success. They started by testing hypotheses and enduring the instructive pain of being wrong. 17. Your health is the primary platform for all operations. It is not a goal to be balanced against others. It is the fundamental capital. Without this biological foundation, all intellectual and financial assets become irrelevant. With it, the capacity for action is boundless. 18. Most actors operate rationally within the limits of their flawed frameworks. This observation does not excuse harmful outcomes, but it is essential for analysis. People are constrained by their incomplete information and faulty models. To understand their actions, you must first seek to understand their map of reality, however distorted. 19. Fear is a signal indicating the perimeter of your current model. The areas that generate the most apprehension are often the very areas that offer the highest return on investment, precisely because they are unexplored. Fear is a compass pointing toward the inefficiencies in your own capabilities. 20. A disciplined mind does not require an opinion on every matter. I do not have a tested hypothesis on this, or I have not allocated analytical capital to this question, are markers of intellectual rigor. An opinion without deep work is a liability. 21. The returns on depth vastly outweigh the returns on breadth. A portfolio of 5 deeply understood, high-conviction assets will outperform 50 held with superficial knowledge. The same principle applies to strategic relationships and intellectual pursuits. 22. Reputation is a critical, intangible asset with asymmetrical volatility. It is accrued slowly through consistent, predictable behavior and can be annihilated by a single black swan event. It must be managed as a core position, guarded, but not to the point of operational paralysis. 23. Significant opportunities are always disguised as complex problems. They appear as difficult work, which acts as a barrier to entry, preventing the market from arbitraging the value away. The difficulty is the opportunity. 24. Your conceptual framework is reflexive. The systems you choose to analyze will, in turn, shape the very structure of your thought. The feedback loop is constant. Therefore, you must allocate your mental attention as carefully as you allocate your capital. 25. Assume every actor is operating with hidden constraints. You are only seeing a fraction of any individual's balance sheet of pressures, incentives, and fears. This principle of incomplete information mandates a degree of analytical humility and strategic patience in all interactions. 26. The objective is not personal perpetuity, but the creation of a self-sustaining system. The goal is to build an entity, an institution, an investment thesis, an ideological framework that can adapt and persist long after your direct involvement has ceased. 27. A principle is only truly held when it incurs a cost. When adhering to your values is easy and profitable, they are merely preferences. They are only stress-tested and proven when they require you to accept a tangible loss or forgo a significant gain. 28. Failures in communication are typically failures in intelligence gathering. There is a tendency to formulate a response before fully diagnosing the problem. The primary objective should be to accurately map the other party's framework, not to immediately impose your own solution. 29. Failure is simply the market's feedback on a flawed hypothesis. It is not a verdict on your character. It is data. Each loss eliminates one path, refines your model, and brings you closer to a workable theory. The cost of the lesson is the tuition for your education. 30. You cannot control exogenous shocks, but you are the sole controller of your response. All personal and financial sovereignty resides in this distinction. The market will do what it does. Your power lies entirely in how you structure your portfolio and execute your strategy in reaction to it. 31. The correct decision is rarely the consensual one. Market consensus is a lagging indicator. True alpha in markets and in leadership is generated by taking a position contrary to prevailing sentiment based on a superior analysis of the underlying reality. 32. The problem is never the amount of capital. It is the integrity of the management system. A process that is flawed at a scale of $1,000 will not be fixed by $1,000. Its flaws will be magnified to the point of collapse. 33. Seek the respect of the competent few, not the approval of the misinformed many. Widespread approval is a sign of a dangerously conventional strategy. Respect from the few individuals whose judgment you hold in high regard is a far more valuable asset. 34. Perfectionism is a form of analysis paralysis. It is a refusal to test a hypothesis in the real world for fear of it being invalidated. An 80% solution deployed today is infinitely more valuable than a theoretical 100% solution that is never deployed. 35. The comfort zone is a state of low-yield equilibrium. All significant growth and all outsized returns exist in the states of disequilibrium, uncertainty, and volatility. To achieve anything of consequence, you must operate there. 36. The power of compounding dictates that the ideal time to begin any long-term project was 20 years ago. The second best time is the present moment. Every day of delay incurs a compounding opportunity cost. 37. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is executing a strategy in the presence of fear. Confidence is not a prerequisite for high-stakes decisions. It is the operational discipline to act on your analysis, even when your emotional signals are screaming to the contrary. 38. You must act your way into a new way of thinking. This is reflexivity. Your actions alter your reality, and the feedback from that new reality alters your beliefs. You cannot remain in a state of pure analysis and expect your perspective to evolve. 39. The critical skill is to differentiate signal from noise. The opinions of those who do not understand your framework are noise. The opinions of those who offer an intelligent critique of it are signal. The former should be ignored. The latter is invaluable. 40. Gratitude is a cognitive framework for recognizing existing assets. It is the discipline of seeing what you have, resources, knowledge, relationships, as a powerful foundation, rather than focusing on deficits. This shifts your baseline from scarcity to capability, which is a more potent platform for action. 41. The system does not automatically distribute rewards based on merit. You get what you effectively negotiate. Value is not passively received. It must be actively claimed through strategic positioning and advocacy. 42. Every market crash is the beginning of a new market. When one dominant system collapses, it is an error to fixate on the wreckage. That is sunk cost, MOD. The rational actor immediately begins scanning the new landscape for the opportunities that have been created in the vacuum. 43. Your initial rapid hypothesis, your gut, is often superior to prolonged deliberation. This is not mysticism. It is your mind's subconscious processor running a complex pattern recognition analysis based on years of data. Overthinking often introduces emotional noise, fear, greed, doubt that corrupts this initial, cleaner signal. 44. The most critical dialectic is the one you have with yourself. The voice that articulates your internal model of the world and is the ultimate source of your decisions. This internal dialogue must be relentlessly rigorous. Its purpose is to stress test your own hypotheses before the unforgiving market does it for you. 45. You cannot deploy capital that you do not possess. This applies to all assets, financial, intellectual, and physical. Maintaining your own reserves is not an act of selfishness. It is a strategic necessity. You cannot effectively influence external systems from a position of internal deficit. 46. Regret from inaction is geometrically larger than regret from failure. A failed action is a hypothesis tested and invalidated. It provides data and a finite realized loss. Inaction represents an untested hypothesis, with an infinite and unknowable opportunity cost. 47. Your network is a system of reciprocal value. Its power is not what you can extract from it, but how you contribute to its overall stability and growth. By strengthening the other nodes in your network, you create a positive feedback loop that reflexively enhances your own position and capabilities. 48. Focus on optimizing your own portfolio, not envying the perceived returns of others. Envy is a misallocation of analytical capital. You are observing the curated outcomes of an external system without access to its underlying data or hidden risks. A rational actor concentrates on the variables they can control. 49. Motivation is sentiment. Systems are strategy. Sentiment is volatile, unreliable, and pro-cyclical. It is useless for long-term operations. A robust system, a set of inviolable rules and processes, is what allows for consistent execution when sentiment inevitably turns against you. 50. Extraordinary returns are generated by a marginal edge, compounded over time. Excellence is not an abstract quality. It is the operational discipline of applying slightly more rigor and analytical depth than the consensus. This small, consistent alpha is the source of all significant long-term success. 51. Severe losses provide the most valuable data. Your pain is the market teaching you a lesson about a systemic flaw you could not see. This hard-won insight becomes your unique analytical platform, giving you an edge that cannot be acquired theoretically. 52. Time dampens the volatility of past events, but it does not erase the data. Scars are permanent markers of past systemic shocks. They are not evidence of victimhood, but data points that remind you where the true tail risks lie and where your previous models failed. 53. The highest yielding investment is in the asset that is yourself. Allocating capital to enhance your own intellectual frameworks, education, your operational platform, health, and your strategic alliances, relationships, will produce compound returns that dwarf any other asset class. 54. This is not a simulation, it is a one-shot game. There is no reset, no control group. The core imperative is to act with conviction on your best developed hypotheses under real-world conditions, because perfect information is a theoretical construct that will never arrive. These 54 observations were not drawn from academic theory. They are the internalized conclusions from a lifelong process of formulating hypotheses and testing them against an unforgiving reality. They were forged in the feedback loop of action and consequence, of building a model, watching the market invalidate it, and then building it better. Some of these frameworks were established early, others are more recent acquisitions, the result of painful reassessments. But they share a common origin. They have moved beyond mere intellectual knowledge to become the core tenets of my operational model. They are not facts in my head, but truths in my bones. I share this framework not to impose it upon you, but with the hope that it may help you to better articulate your own. Wisdom cannot be transferred like capital or information. It is a unique structure each individual must build for themselves through their own process of trial and error. Your life is a different experiment than mine. Your variables, your market conditions, your starting capital, they are all unique. Therefore, your resulting insights will necessarily be your own. However, perhaps some of these observations resonate with your data or provide a language for a conclusion you had already felt but not yet formulated. In doing so, you may refine your own model for navigating a complex and uncertain world. Perhaps some of them might provide a terminology for a conclusion you have already intuited but not yet articulated. And perhaps, in the process, they might help you avoid a category of error that I personally found costly to learn. As I enter my 55th year of operation, my primary conviction is that the territory of my ignorance remains vastly larger than my current conceptual framework. I fully anticipate making new categories of mistakes, which will in turn reveal new, unanticipated truths. The global system will produce shocks I cannot forecast, which will provide lessons I cannot yet imagine. This is the fundamental condition of operating within a complex, open system. The process of refining one's model is perpetual. It does not end. Every day presents a new set of data and a new opportunity to develop a more accurate, predictive model, a more nuanced understanding of other actors, and a greater capacity to influence outcomes. My current framework is, therefore, a product of 54 years of inputs, of survived errors, of the thinkers who shaped my models, the market shocks that forced their revision, and the strategic choices that defined my path. What it will become is a function of the lessons Year 55 has yet to deliver. The ultimate education is not found in classrooms or in texts, but in the unforgiving feedback loop of action and consequence. The most potent teachers are not lecturers, but the lived results of your own tested hypotheses. Therefore, consider your life to be your primary curriculum. Pay rigorous attention to the data it provides. The central task remains: what is the most critical flaw in your current model of the world? And what is the next hypothesis you must test? The inquiry continues.